When we first started selling Port Ellen as part of the special releases, it was under £200. By the time it ended, it was way over 2,000 pounds, and they just go up and up and up. So for whiskey collectors, it's kind of like the holy grail of whiskey, Scotch whiskey, and people just obsess over it.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to Collector's Gene Radio. This is all about diving into the nuances of collecting and ultimately finding out whether or not our guests have what we like to call the collector's gene. If you have the time, please subscribe and leave a review. It truly helps. Thanks a bunch for listening, and please enjoy today's guest. This is Ewan Morgan.
Ewan Morgan, National Luxury Ambassador and Head of Whiskey Outreach for Diageo. Thank you for joining me on Collector's Gene Radio.
Well, thank you for having me here, Cameron. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. We're at this unbelievable unit in One Wall Street here. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
and
it doesn't suck.
It doesn't suck, and I think it's a testament to all the things that you work on and all the brands that you work with and Diageo. And you don't have to incriminate yourself here, but at what point in your life did you get interested in Scotch and whiskey?
I was born into Scotch. So I grew up on a distillery in Speyside, and I'm third generation whiskey. So my dad made whiskey, and my grandfather made whiskey. All of my uncles make whiskey. Guess what all my cousins do? They make whiskey.
Amazing.
And my son, he's fourth generation. He also works in whiskey. He moved back to Scotland to do that. So I was born into it.
Okay, you had no choice.
I didn't have a choice. But like this apartment, it doesn't suck.
Yes, that's for sure. And you've held a ton of different positions in this industry. I mean, ranging from everything from ground floor to where you're at now. So can you tell everyone how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I left school at the age of 16 on a Friday, and on the Monday morning, I started working in production, making whiskey. Me and a team of 5 other guys shoveled 44 tons of malt every morning, which is kind of back-breaking work. Sure. But it was my introduction into the world of Scotch whiskey. And I'm so glad I did it. So I have that production background. A lot of people who do what I do don't have a production background. Yeah. So I have a really good understanding of how Scotch is made because I've made it. And now, you know, to your point, I've had many, many different titles. And I've worked in the UK, and I've worked in France and Middle East. And now I live here in the United States and cover the whole country, evangelizing about whiskey.
Converting.
Yeah, converting. Yeah, that's actually fun fact. That's my favorite part of the job. Is when people come in and say, I hate whiskey, I hate Scotch whiskey, it all tastes like Band-Aid, and then I show them how to appreciate it, how to nose, how to taste, and then they have this kind of light bulb moment, and they're like, actually, I like this, or I find elements of this interesting, and that I really love.
Yeah, for sure. Out of all the positions that you've had, besides the one you have now, was there one that was your favorite?
No, my current role. Yeah, it took me a long time to get here, and I love it. I love everything about it. I love the fact I get to travel, because I love travel. I get to eat at very nice restaurants, and I love food. I get to meet fascinating human beings, and I just love everything about it. I have a good amount of autonomy to like create my own events. I have access to some of the rarest, most delicious whiskies on the planet. I can't think of anything that I don't like about it. I travel 85%, and for a lot of people, they're like, well, that sounds like a lot, and it is, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I really love it.
Yeah. I want to talk about collecting for a minute, because I don't think that you probably could have gotten to where you are today if you weren't a collector and you didn't have that collector's mindset. How long have you been collecting this stuff?
I've been collecting Scotch whiskey for about 25 years.
Wow.
And it just happened. So being part of the industry, you just kind of acquire bottles. People gift them to you, or you have access to them and you buy them, or you meet collectors and you swap, and then you just kind of start to assimilate all of these bottles to the point where I now have 3 different collections. So 2 in Scotland. Actually, I have 4. 2 in Scotland, 1 in my house, and the value of the Scotch in my house is worth more than my house. And I have a storage unit as well.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I have a lot of whiskey.
Now, I think we're in a time where collectibles and assets and all these things are growing like crazy. But I think that what's interesting is that in this market, it's also growing very rapidly, but it's one of those things that people enjoy, right? What is the ideation and the juxtaposition of a collector that collects Scotch and whiskey and Scotch whiskey to take out a rare bottle and crack it open? Is it one of those like oof moments, or is it an exciting moment, or?
That's a fascinating question, and it's not as binary as you may think. There are collectors who collect purely for financial gain, so they buy something because they're going to see an appreciation, or they're forecasting an appreciation. Or you have collectors who are completionists. So for example, they may collect Port Ellen, or they may collect Lagavulin, or they may collect Mortlach. And that's kind of what they hone in on. In fact, I had two collectors at my dinner that I did last night. One of them primarily just focuses on Lagavulin, and he has hundreds and hundreds of bottles, and he's never been to the distillery. He's going next year, and I was talking to him last night. Do you think you'll cry when you walk through the gates? He's like, I know I'm going to cry. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. So you have these people who have this really nice connection to a distillery, even if they haven't been there. Then you have people who love the whiskey to drink. I have a customer in Long Beach, actually Orange County. She has two houses, and she buys whiskey. She bought a $55,000 bottle of whiskey in 1966 Dufton, and then she went home and she drank it with her dinner, and then she bought another one the next day.
That's kind of the epitome of the place we're sitting right now.
Yeah, she's a very fascinating lady. Owns real estate. Started from nothing.
Wow.
Started off buying, small kind of flipper houses. Worked her way up, and now she has lots of like office spaces, and she just sells real estate and drinks really expensive whiskey.
What do you think it is about the ceremonious aspect of opening a bottle of, whether it's rare or not, right? Because collectors collect within every type of budget and what makes the most sense to them, right? So I might not be buying a $50,000 bottle, but for me...
Oh, you're not?
Well, maybe after today. You'll probably convince me. But, even for me, opening up something that is $100 to $200 is really special, right? And for me, I do that on a special occasion. But what do you think it is about that ceremonious aspect of opening a bottle of something rare that tastes so good, and whether you know a lot about it or not, there is that celebration of...
Yeah, I would say it doesn't have to be expensive for it to be special.
Right.
That's something that I talk about quite a lot. So long as it's special to you, and it could be a whiskey from like your birth year, or it could be a whiskey that somebody gifted to you, whether you graduated or got married or whatever. So long as there's this emotional attachment to it, then it's special. So it doesn't have to be like $50,000 or even $200. So long as it's special to you. But going back to like the whole ceremony of it, there is this wonderful sense of satisfaction, like where you have the bottle in front of you, you're going to enjoy it, you're sharing it with friends, or you maybe just savoring it on your own, and like you pull away the foil, and then you pull off the cork, and it makes this incredible noise, and then you take your first smell, and it's quite this kind of ethereal moment, and then you just spend time just sipping it, savoring it, enjoying it. And if you're with friends, getting feedback from them on what they really like about it, or if there's a story behind it, recounting that tale to the person who's with you. So there's lots of different wonderful aspects to it, and it doesn't have to be. It could be wine, it could be cognac. I just focus on whiskey.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful thing.
It sure is.
Yeah.
When you started collecting, how would you say that it's evolved from then and to the point
Oh
that
my
you're
goodness.
at now?
So I was talking about this last night, where I used to work for Suntory, Japanese company, and we used to get all of these like bottles of Yamazaki or whatever, and we would buy them in our staff shop, and they would be cheap, like £25.
Wow.
And they now go for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So I have legacy whiskies back then, and that are now worth a lot of money. But when I bought them, they weren't particularly expensive.
Sure.
So for me to see that appreciation over time, and I'll probably never sell them, I'll just keep them. My son collects whiskey, so he'll probably eventually get everything. I hope he's not watching this, but
we can cut it out when he...
But it's a really nice legacy thing to like pass on to people as well.
Yeah.
And they, typically they never depreciate. They always continue to go up in value, but it's not really so much about the value. It's about the emotional connection to them, because they all have a story behind them.
As it is with a lot of collectibles, right? I mean, anything that you collect is all about the story. And I think if you're a real collector, you care more about the story than you care about the value of something. And is there anything specific that you have that you are really excited to pass down one day?
I have a lot of whiskey.
That's right. You said you have 4.
So I have the full collection of Port Ellen from the special releases. So I have all of those. I have a lot of Brora as well. So two distilleries that both closed in 1983, and coincidentally 2 distilleries that Diageo have brought back, so reopened. Brora a couple of years ago, and Port Ellen just a few weeks ago. I was over there for the opening of that, which was a very emotional experience for me, because they also brought a lot of people who worked at the distillery in 1983 when it closed, and they thought that was it forever, because they actually demolished most of it. Wow. And they watched the first barrels being filled, and there was people crying and things like that. So that wonderful moment where you're seeing like whiskey history being made and something coming back, kind of this Lazarus moment for a distillery, which is wonderful. But so I have those. I have a lot of Japanese whiskeys that are worth a lot of money. Not that the financial thing is that important, but they are worth a lot of money. So those are the ones that kind of pop into my head.
You said that you trade between different collectors, and I'm sure different people in your industry. Mm-hmm. How about the auction space for buying rare whiskeys? So
personally, I never buy at auction because I don't need to. But and I'm not boasting here, but that's I kind of just acquire things along the way, and I know a lot of I know a lot of collectors, and I actually used to trade a lot of whiskey with a guy called Harvey Fry, who worked at Jack Rose in DC, who had a huge collection. In fact, his whole house was full of whiskey. Wow. I went to visit, he sadly passed away a few years ago. I went to visit him one day to swap some whiskey, and I went into his bedroom, and his bedroom was like a fort. It was just cases of whiskey up to the roof, and then a mattress in the middle of the room. I was like, what would happen if there was an earthquake and these fell over? Yeah. And he's just like, oh, well, I would die happy. I was like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so typically I'll swap and I'll trade, and no money changes hands, and it's just a nice thing. And there's a really good community of people, like whiskey collectors, spirit collectors are an interesting bunch. They've all got really fascinating stories. And you get access to very old, very rare whiskies.
Yeah.
And so long as you have something of comparable value to them, either emotionally or fiscally, then it's great. And the banter is always great.
I would have to imagine the dinner table or the bar chairs.
Yeah. They're an interesting bunch. Some of them are somewhat odd, but yeah.
Well, everyone's got to have a little bit.
Yeah, they all have their kind of weird idiosyncrasies, which is
all
great.
of us collectors have something odd about us.
Yeah.
What kind of whiskeys are you hunting for now for your personal collecting?
All right, I have a unicorn whiskey. It's not a Diageo whiskey though. It's a 1973 Springbank rum cask.
Okay.
It's in a green label, and I've been looking for it a long time. Somebody offered me one a few years ago for an inordinate amount of money, and I was just like, I can't justify that. That's like the cost of a car. So I didn't, and I kind of regret it a little bit. It's in Singapore right now. I know exactly where it is and who has it, but it's a very rare whiskey. The new Port Ellen Gemini. I've been lucky enough to taste it a few times, and it looks spectacular. I would love to have one of those, but that's a $50,000 investment.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I want to go back to talking about Port Ellen because it did just reopen, and I think it'd be important to tell all the listeners why it closed down, why it reopened, and why it's so important to not only Diageo, but why it's important to the collector community and the Scotch community.
So Port Ellen is an interesting case study. That distillery closed in 1983, along with many others in that year, and it was one of the darkest eras of Scotch whiskey. And the reason why it happened was there was a overproduction of Scotch. So there was what they call the whiskey loch, and there was too much of it being made. So there was a surplus, and then vodka started to overtake brown spirits, and there was a lot of investment in advertising that went behind vodka. And so Scotch started to do this, and vodka started to do this. And then a lot of companies were just like, we need to reconsolidate. Otherwise, we're going to go under. So they decided to close a number of distilleries, Port Ellen being one of them, Brora being another. And then they closed in 1983. And then over time, they just became kind of whiskey lore. A lot of collectors latched in on the fact that it was never going to make whiskey again. It was a finite resource. Because it was a finite resource, it became rarer and rarer, and then the value goes up and up and up. When we first started selling Port Ellen as part of the special releases, it was under £200. By the time it had ended, it was way over £2,000. And then they just go up and up and up. So for whiskey collectors, it's kind of like the holy grail of whiskey, Scotch whiskey. And people just obsess over it. And then the fact that we've just reopened it again, you've got these people who have got this new fascination with the distillery, but we're not going to see any liquid in a bottle from that distillery for over a decade.
Wow.
So yeah, I'll be over 60 by the time we see anything from that distillery.
Wow. Crazy. And how important do you think it is the collector market to have this back?
Very. It shows a number of things. It shows that we're willing to invest in this distillery in the long term. So we're not going to see anything coming back from it financially. And we're a PLC, so this is a rare thing to do an investment where you're not going to see anything coming back for over 10 years.
Sure.
So the long-term investment in it, also the fact that people can now go and visit the distillery, and there's a wonderful luxury experience when you visit it. So it's something you can actually take a pilgrimage to and visit. And also the fact that people who have been collecting Port Ellen are now seeing much more general interest, whereas it was fairly kind of like a cult thing before. It was like one of these distilleries like Springbank I was talking about, like Clynelish, these very collectible kind of niche distilleries. And now we're seeing articles in general media that are out there. And again, we've done this wonderful algorithm where we looked at the two different liquids that have come through from this Port Ellen Gemini. And one is in an original cask, finished in an original cask, and one is in what's called a remnant cask. But they all came from the same 3 barrels from 1978, and then we split them into 2. And then we're seeing the difference between those. And this algorithm is basically analyzing what our blending teams or our chemists would look at. So all of these like fancy names like syringylaldehyde or cis-oak-lactone and things like that. And it's like, what do those actually mean? So this algorithm will actually put flavors next to it and say coconut, earthy, smoky. So at a glance, you see this animation of the two different whiskies, and you will see the difference in variances between them and what you would expect to see. So one of these whiskies is way more vanilla-led, has more like apple-y notes to it, quite fruity, red berry vibrancy. And the other one is definitely more, I'd say, stoic. It's like what an old whiskey would typically taste like. So it has these wonderful, like old stewed fruits in it. There's an element of smoke in there. So 2 very different whiskies that came from the same 3 barrels that have been finished. So, and people are fascinated by that, injecting that new style of technology, this algorithm, into something that's old and has been made the same way for hundreds and hundreds of years, but we've never fully analyzed it in that way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really special. Where's a really good place for collectors to start collecting in this space?
Other than my house.
Yeah, I'm not going to give them your address.
There are a number of really good resources. So I would say try before you buy. And there's amazing whiskey bars here. I talked about Jack Rose earlier on in DC, but then you go to Portland, you've got Multnomah Whiskey Library. Here in New York, you've got Brandy Library, Copper and Oak. You've also got Hawksmoor as well, and they have wonderful collections of whiskey, old vintage whiskies as well, and you can go and try them. And then understand whether or not you like that flavor profile or not. Because sometimes people say, I really love Lagavulin, I like the idea of Lagavulin, and then they taste it and it's like, oh, I didn't realize it was that smoky.
Right.
And it's like, well, you should have really tasted it first. So go and talk to these people, taste these whiskeys, And then if you're interested in purchasing these old vintage bottles, I mean, there's many auction sites out there. There's also, really great resources. If you go on the internet, you'll find these collector groups.
Sure.
The Reddit wormhole, if you want to go in there. There's a lot of people in there who collect, and they will also give great advice as well. Well, usually great advice.
Right.
Be careful
Who you get it from.
Yeah. So find someone who you trust, or find someone who already collects, or reach out to them as well, because they're all very friendly, and they love nothing more than teaching people about what they're obsessed with, which is collecting whiskey. They'll talk to you all day.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So there's some really wonderful resources out there.
That's great. In 2014, you received an award, which is becoming the keeper of the Quaich.
There you go.
Did I get that?
Yeah, we practiced earlier.
Which is as high of an honor as you could really get in this industry. Mm-hmm. And so obviously a late congratulations, because we're just getting together for the first time. But do you tell everyone what that is about and why you were given that honoree?
So the Keepers of the Quaich is a worldwide society based in Scotland at a castle called Blair Castle. And every year, twice a year, they induct nominees. And so your name will be passed on to a committee. And then the committee will look at what you've done to push Scotch, be it through education or sales or whatever. There's a number of criteria. And then they basically decide whether or not you get in or not. And then if you get in, you get invited to this, I can't really talk too much about it, you get invited to this fancy ceremony. There's a private army, and you get guided in, and then once you're in the doors, I can't tell you what happens, but you get inducted into this society called the Keepers of the Quaich. And there's US chapters, they're all over the place. In fact, there's one coming up in May in DC at the British Embassy, and hundreds of people turn up, and a good time is had by all. But 2014 I was inducted into that, and it's a great honor.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, cheers to you.
Thank you.
I know you brought some stuff for us to try, and we're going to do a little bit of a tasting, so we'll cut to that. And I think I'll save the Collector's Gene rundown for our conversation there.
All right. So Cameron, what we have in front of us here is a very special twin set of whiskies. So this is Port Ellen Gemini. This is 44-year-old single malt Scotch from a distillery called Port Ellen on the Isle of Islay, which closed in 1983, just reopened a couple of weeks ago. I was lucky enough to be there for the reopening of it. And this is now available here in the United States, and I know you're a novice when it comes to this. Yep. So we have set the bar high. This set retails for $50,000.
I am honored.
Yeah, but I'm going to walk you through these two, but let me explain what we have in front of us. So we have a 1978 vintage. These came from 3 different sherry barrels that sat in the warehouse. And then what we did was we split those liquids into 2. One went into what we call an original cask, which is the one on the left. And that would have had sherry in it before, so that's called a puncheon cask. Then the other one was finished in what's called a remnant cask. A remnant cask is a barrel that sits in what we call a filling store. It's where we fill our barrels after we make our spirit. And that would have had liquid in it from 1963 through to 1983. So it's seen these generations of different whiskies coming from this wonderful distillery. So 2 very different styles of whiskey that came from 3 sister casks. So they are twins, but they're not identical twins. And I'm going to show you how to nose and how to taste.
I can't wait.
The way I was shown how to do it a long time ago. So we'll start off with the one on the left. This is the original cask. And what we do with any whiskey is we analyze it. And so we're going to look at the colour, we're going to look at its viscosity, and then we're going to nose, and then we're going to taste. So in order to look at the viscosity, these are called mini Glencairn glasses, and they're perfect because they have this really nice kind of tulip bulb in them, and then they flume up to the top. So we're going to concentrate aromas at the top of the glass. First thing we do is we tilt it to the side, and then using your other hand, just slowly rotate it 2 or 3 times so you coat the inside of the bowl, and then put it upright, and then watch how slowly the liquid goes down the inside. Is it fast or slow?
It's
Pretty slow.
Very slow.
Yeah.
Unctuous
Yes.
is a word I would use. And that's going to tell us the viscosity of the whiskey, which is important because if it's slow, what we're going to see is a really nice mouth coating experience. It's going to carry flavour for longer. If it ran down fast, you're going to get what we call an alcohol bloom or flash, and the flavour is going to dissipate quite quickly. But because this is going to coat our palate, it's going to carry flavour for a long time. So
Awesome.
all of the colour that you see comes from the barrel as well. So when whiskey is first made, it's completely clear. So all of this colour and a good amount of the aroma, a good amount of the flavour is all coming from the barrels that we use to mature the whiskey. The next thing we do is we nose. And if you imagine that your glass is a clock face, keep your mouth slightly open so you can circulate air. Start your nose here above the 12 o'clock position and then gently move your nose down to below the 6 o'clock position.
Okay.
So let's do that together.
All right.
And what you will see as you're travelling down is those lighter fruity notes are up here. So there's red berry, there's some orchard fruit like red apple skin are all sitting up here. As you get further down though, you're going to see more density. So those heavier, sugary, sweet characteristics. The smoke is going to sit down here. That creme brulee, like heavy vanilla note is also down here. And the reason why that happens, and you're seeing that variance, is because alcohol is going to propel what we call congeners, and congeners are the impurities in whiskey that make whiskey whiskey. If they weren't there, it would be a neutral spirit, it would be vodka,
Right.
And I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. So the lighter ones, they're called esters, they flume up the way because they have a light molecular weight, so you're going to smell them up here, and then the heavier ones are going to fall off like an invisible waterfall. So you're going to smell everything from here all the way down to here. And if you saw this as kind of a vapor thing on a fancy camera that we don't have today, you would actually see that effect happening here. It's fascinating. So we've done that, and then you will also see if you go on the YouTubes or the internet, you will see like whiskey experts saying, ram your nose in there like a truffle pig and start inhaling wildly. Don't do that because you will go nose blind. You have a thing up your nose called your olfactory bulb or your olfactory epithelium, hardwired straight into your cerebral cortex. It's very sensitive, and if you're hoovering up high strength alcohols, you can go nose blind. You don't want that to happen. If it does happen, you can like smell the crook of your arm or your wrist and you will reset your nose. So if it does happen, do that, but just don't do that. Also, you look kind of silly when you do it. So we've had a look
anywhere.
No. So we've had a look at the viscosity, the colour, the nose, and then finally we're going to taste, and there's a process to this as well. So if this is your tongue, I want you to take a small sip and hold it here in the middle of your tongue, and then I will tell you what to do. Go.
Okay.
Alright. Now, gently tilt your head from side to side. Wash the spirit off both sides of your palate, and then gently move your head forward so it runs down underneath your tongue. Also get it in front of your teeth, and then spend some time on the front palate. It's going to give you the whole forward mouth feel of this whiskey, and then slowly swallow. And this is the most important part. Gently draw air in over your tongue, and then close your mouth and breathe out through both nostrils for as long as you can.
Wow.
Right, did you see the difference?
Yes.
So that's a process, it's called retronasal olfaction. It's just a very fancy way of saying you're circulating air around your soft palate and out through your nostrils.
Yeah.
Orthonasal is in, retronasal is out. And why is that important? You're spending the maximum amount of time with the spirit on your palate, and your nose is a very, very important part of this tools kit as well, because it is hardwired straight into your brain. There's no filter there, it just goes straight in and it will fire signals that will say this reminds me of baked apple, vanilla, or remind me of the time I had an apple strudel in Austria, which is what this one reminds me of. I was talking about that last night. So it should be an evocative experience drinking spirits.
Yeah, that was special.
Yeah. So this is Port Ellen Gemini. So very vibrant, very alive for such an old whiskey, 44 years old. You have a huge amount of these kind of young, bright flavours coming through from it. Conversely, when we look at the next whiskey, which is the remnant cask, you're going to smell more like old whiskey smells like. So it's more subdued. I said stoic last night. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's definitely, this is the bright, vibrant one, and this is the old kind of controlled style of spirit that you would normally see with whiskey.
And there's a color difference that you can see.
Yeah, so you will see this one is much darker.
Yeah, sure.
So that heavily charred remnant cask that we're using here is going to give you more of that depth of colour. So looking again at our viscosity on here, again, it's slow. It's almost like molasses slow going down the inside of the glass. And then on the nose, you'll see it's very different. And this one here, you know, I've got this kind of nice brown sugar note in here. There's a little bit of a cereal characteristic going on in here. You've got this kind of old stewed fruit. And like I say, this reminded me of the first time I ever went to Austria with my parents when I was a kid. And I tasted apple strudel, and I was like, this is the most amazing dessert I've ever had. And it reminds me of that. You've got this.
Well, that's
really
how
nice
I feel about
stewed
this
note.
tasting. Is that you tasted that and you were screwed when you had that for the first time, and that's how I feel about tasting this.
Yeah, because you're starting off with like one of the rarest whiskies in the world, and obviously it's a fairly expensive proposition as well. So let's have a little look at the taste on this one. So cheers.
Cheers.
So, stewed fruits, they've got this really nice kind of baked apple, whereas this is like bright red apple and berry. This is like got clove in it, there's some spice in here, like baking spice in here, you've got that caramelized brown sugar in here, and just all of this really nice kind of spicy peppery note that goes on in here as well. Whereas this one is more like a dessert whiskey, and this one's more like an old style of single malt whiskey. And I'm going to show you a trick. It's a very expensive trick to show you, but if you ever want to know what your spirit is made from, you can cheat.
Alright.
So if you're ever doing a spirits exam like WSET or whatever, you just have to pour a tiny amount, because it's very expensive, and then rub your hands together until you feel heat. And when you feel heat, you've burnt off the alcohol, and then you smell it, and you'll smell malted barley.
Oh wow.
Right. So you can do that with any spirit.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you will know what this is made from just by doing that. And this was made from 100% malted barley, malted at the distillery. That's his own maltings. So this would have been very smoky when it was first made. This would have been about as smoky as what Lagavulin is.
Amazing. And remind me, how long did these barrels sit?
They're 44 years.
Wow.
1978.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie, but people probably killed to try this stuff.
Yeah. You're a very lucky boy. We're
it.
very lucky boys.
I feel it between being in this apartment today and trying all this stuff.
Life doesn't suck.
Amazing.
We're very #blessed to get to taste these wonderful spirits.
Well, thank you for allowing me to try these. I know it's not an easy thing to give up and let people taste, but I really do appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And I think while we have a little bit left, I'd love to jump into the collector's Gene rundown and kind of get to know your collecting side of things a little bit better. So you can answer these based on your personal collecting. You can answer them based on things you saw when you were a kid that your family was working on, or things that you've seen working for Diageo. So the first question is what's the one that got away?
It's a 1973 rum cask Springbank.
All right.
I'm still seeking that unicorn whiskey. So if there's anyone out there, hit me up.
The on-deck circle. So what's next for you in collecting? Maybe something that is a little bit more reachable that you're searching after?
So I'm an avid collector, hoarder, my wife might say, and I collect a lot of like alcohol stuff, like old advertising, posters, guitars, watches, albums like vinyl, as well as spirit, and books. I have hundreds and hundreds of books, and I love everything about it. I love seeking things out and finding them. And one of the best things I ever found was on eBay. Like many other people, I troll eBay all the time, and there's an old book from the 1920s that was written by the sales team for Johnny Walker at that point. They had a global sales team. They were based out of London, and they travelled the globe, and they created a travel book. and I found one on eBay for $20. And our archive has one, and my one's in better condition than theirs.
I love that. That's a flex.
And it is a wonderful like fold-out map, and it's like where to eat, what to do on your time off. I'll send you some pictures of it. It's an incredible book.
Yeah. Are there any more of those on the market that pop up?
I've never seen one since.
Unreal.
Yeah, and it was just by chance. It was just, you know what, I'm gonna have a little look, and I found something the other day. So here's another funny story. I was in Dallas last week, and I was working in Dallas. I was doing things for Christie's.
Sure.
And so we had a bunch of collectors there, and I met this bartender, and her grandfather was an animator for Disney. His name was Mr. Apodaca, and he was responsible for lots of things, including Alvin and the Chipmunks. And I went on eBay, and I found a drawing that he had done of Mickey from Fantasia with the wand and the hat, and it was signed by him. So I got it. And she doesn't know that she's getting it yet, but we're going to get it framed.
Oh, amazing. What a gift.
So even seeing little things like that, you know, collecting, you can have these wonderful moments of like altruism where you get someone, and they don't expect that they're going to get something, you get them something really special.
Gifting's my favorite part of this hobby.
It's the best, and I'm gifting this to you.
I appreciate that. You might not ever be able to gift something better than this.
Yeah.
The page one rewrite, so if you could collect anything, money no object, besides Scotch whiskey, what would it be?
Watches. 100%.
Is there a brand that resonates with you? Because we get a lot of watch people here.
I like Rolex. I like vintage Rolex.
Sure.
I like JLC watches a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just really like these bowls. I love your watch as well. But yeah, during COVID, I taught myself how to repair and make watches. So I bought a lot of broken watches, like large railway watches, and then learned how to take them apart, put them back together again, clean them, service them, and then I started buying broken Rolexes, old Amigas, and fixing them and either gifting them or passing them along.
Amazing.
And I love everything about it. I love the mechanics of them. I love looking at the mechanics, how they work. And you know, Rolex are one of the easier watches to take apart. They're so well made. They're over engineered, so they're very easy to take. Well, relatively easy to take apart, put back together again. So I can service watches, and I'm just fascinated by it. So, in answer to your question, watches.
Love it.
100%.
Easy.
Yeah.
How about the unobtainable? So this is something that is in a private collection or a museum or something, you know, that's just complete unobtainium. Couldn't even get it if you wanted to.
That's a fascinating question. So, again, I'm going to tell you a story. I did an event at the Morgan Library quite recently, and we had the curator of books doing a talk before I did my wine whiskey tasting for collectors, and they had Gutenberg Bible there. They actually had two, and they showed it to us, and he was like, "You can turn the pages." We had to put the gloves on, got to turn the pages. So like old books with that level of history behind them, but I don't have 80 million to buy one of those books.
I know, right?
And they have two. So maybe something like that, or like a vintage guitar.
Yeah.
I saw there was an auction item that came up. It was Leadbelly's guitar.
Oh, amazing.
And he used to live here in New York actually, and so something like that, like again, something with real history behind it.
Yeah.
And I love Leadbelly, so something like that. So maybe the guitar.
Yeah.
I would get more use out of the guitar than I would an old Bible.
Did you know that J.P. Morgan obviously was a massive watch collector? Mm-hmm. He had made a book of his whole collection, as almost like his own personal archive. And it's in the library. You can go and see it. Mm-hmm. And there's been a couple copies that have come up to auction, but that's high on my list. But they're a fortune. And it's like, you think about what you're spending for a book, and you're like, I could buy a watch.
That library, and if folks have never been to the Morgan Library, I would highly encourage them to do so. The collection that they have there is spectacular. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And they're the nicest people as well. Yeah, they really are. Yeah. Super helpful.
How about the GOAT? So who do you look up to in the collecting world? Who do you think is just a great, fantastic collector?
There's a few. So I watch a lot of YouTube, and there's a lot of really good like guitar collectors out there, watch collectors out there, and it's the ones who have like a story are the ones I kind of emote to. And I watched it was John Mayer and Ed Sheeran just talking about watches, and I thought that was fascinating. Like why they like them, like what are their holy grail. They have a lot of money, obviously. What their holy grail watches are, and it's just nice seeing two people so passionate about something and just like chatting about it. And they could have talked for hours and hours and hours, and it was so watchable. And they just came across as very nice people who love watches, and I love watches as well. So I thought, although I wouldn't put them up in this pedestal of like collectors who I would want to be, but I just like watching people talk about things that they're passionate about, and they were very personable. So I enjoyed. Yeah,
there was like a genuine happiness and
you can tell that they genuinely like each other as well.
Yeah.
And that always comes across, you know, if you see two people and there's no chemistry there, it's hard to watch.
For sure. But
those two, you know, you can tell they really like each other and they would have chatted all day about it. So I love stuff like that. I love storytelling as well. And people who can like weave a personal story into whatever, like collecting, it really humanizes it. And that's a big part of what I do, storytelling and trying to humanize liquid and that. And sometimes that's easy and sometimes, you know, you have to go and do a lot of research to find something you love, right? Because if you don't love it, again, the same thing goes with the chemistry thing. If you don't love it, then that comes across very, very, very quickly.
Yeah, well, I think the hard part for people is, especially with something like this, it's you drink it and it's gone, right? You enjoyed it, but I think they look past the idea of you and I are sitting here, and you're going to have this memory, and I'm going to have this memory of us enjoying this, and you're going to think about how crazy it is that you let me try this $50,000 set as my first legit tasting. You know, not my first whiskey, but my first legit tasting. And, you know, we'll have this memory to look back on. I think people skip over that part. Yeah,
and you hit the nail on the head there. Although it's gone, you know, that memory is always going to be there.
For sure.
And that's the wonderful thing again about spirits is it's a very convivial thing. You do it with friends, or if you're at home, then you know you're thinking about things, and those all like logged. You'd associate that with the whiskey. So if you're having a great time, we're having a great time right now, and you're never going to forget the fact that we sat in this very fancy apartment here on One Wall Street and enjoyed this spectacular whiskey with this phenomenal view that the viewers can't see, but we can. And you know, that's what makes life wonderful, is these small little moments of joy, and I love bringing joy to people. It's the best part of my job.
For sure. Do you enjoy the hunt or the ownership more?
Hunt. 100%. If you ask any collector, it's about the hunt. And like the thrill of the chase, or even the portion when you come down to the negotiation, and do they want to trade, or is it just like a financial transaction? But finding it, you know, that's the fun.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Most importantly, do you feel that you were born with the collector's gene?
100%. There's no question about it. I'm always looking for something, the next thing, and then even if it's just a gift to someone, like I was talking about earlier on, I just love it. Yeah. I love collecting things. I love finding things. I love researching things. And then you know, you just scour the internets, or you talk to people. A lot of the stuff that I've acquired is through, you know, personal contact. It's not just buying on the internet. And then you meet these wonderful human beings, you know. And we were talking about this earlier on. They all have their own weird idiosyncrasies.
Yes.
And again, it's just part of life. It's just enriching your life by meeting people. And you collect people at the same time as collecting, you know, whiskey or watches. And I love that.
Amazing. Ewan, thank you so much for joining me on Collector's Gene Radio today. This has been incredible from start to finish, and this was obviously very special, and congrats on everything that you guys are doing with Port Ellen and over at Diageo. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me.
My pleasure. We'll do this again soon.
All right. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks.
Today's episode was filmed at the beautiful One Wall Street building and residences. Since it was inaugurated in 1931, One Wall Street has always been considered an Art Deco masterpiece. Today, this impeccably restored landmark structure has been reborn as the epitome of luxury living in downtown Manhattan. Also, special thanks to the team at Diageo NYC for arranging this interview. As always, please celebrate responsibly.